I want to talk about CT image quality in this podcast. Under CT image quality, the two topics I want to discuss today is the spatial resolution and contrast resolution. These two are important image quality factors in CT, and I want to discuss about various factors which influences or affects this two important image quality. To study the impact of the spatial resolution and contrast resolution, one can start with looking at the various scan parameters and that influences the radiation dose and image quality in CT. I'm going to focus on the secondary factors when I'm talking about the spatial resolution and contrast resolution. Secondary factors are those factors which influences how the images are displayed, how the images are reconstructed, and so forth, which in a way has an impact on the image quality, such as spatial resolution and contrast resolution. So let me start with spatial resolution. Spatial resolution is defined as the ability of the imaging system to resolve small independent objects in close proximity to one another. In CT, the spatial resolution can be examined in two different ways. One is the axial resolution, also called the XY plane in-plane resolution. Second is the longitudinal resolution, or the Z-axis resolution. The axial resolution is influenced by or determined by the image matrix size, the display field of view, and the pixel size of the image. In fact, the axial resolution in CT has been very high for a long time. The main driving force in the past 10 to 15 years is the improvement in the longitudinal resolution. That is determined by the detector array thickness. Typically, the spatial resolution in CT is measured using resolution bar patterns, which are expressed as line pair per millimeter or line pair per centimeter. There are more sophisticated and more detailed way one can measure the spatial resolution, but for a quick visual inspection or evaluation of a spatial resolution can be simply done by imaging a bar pattern. Physicists often use phantoms to evaluate various image quality factors. One such phantom is the accreditation phantom used by the American College of Radiology. Shown on this slide on the left hand side is the ACR-CT phantom, which is a water equivalent material of different modules, and one of the module has embedded spatial resolution patterns. By scanning this particular phantom, one can visually inspect the capability of an imaging system, what the resolution it can resolve. Before going into more detail about the spatial resolution, let me examine some basic factors about the CT scanner. In this slide shown is a cutaway of a CT gantry. The wide opening of the gantry, typically the CT gantry opening is about 70 centimeters in diameter. And but actual image sampling is done a little bit smaller than the gantry opening. In fact, the maximum sampling region is about 50 centimeters, which is less than the gantry opening. In fact, that's the reason why sometimes in the obese patients, on obese patient images, we see images chopped up in the shoulder or the hip region, which may have extended beyond the sampling region. Shown also on this figure is the yellow circle, which is defined as the user-defined scan field of view. The user-defined scan field of view can go all the way up to the sampling region, but can't go beyond that region. So the user-defined scan field of view is selected by the user depending on the body part he or she is scanning, because that ultimately influences how the images are displayed, which we call it as a display field of view. The display field of view cannot be larger than the scan field of view. The reason is like the spatial resolution in the axial direction is influenced by the pixel size and the display field of view. In fact, the display field of view is defined by the user based on anatomy size to be displayed. and typically the display field of view is always less than the scan field of view. The pixel size is defined as a ratio of the display field of view by the matrix size. For example, for a typical matrix size of 512 by 512, by changing the display field of view from 40 centimeter to 20 centimeter, the pixel size in the display field of view decreases by 0.78 millimeter to 0.39 millimeter. What does it mean? It means it's like smaller the pixel size, the spatial resolution is higher, and larger the pixel size, the spatial resolution can be decreased. So on the right hand side are the spatial resolution images reconstructed at two different display field of view. On the 50 centimeter display field of view and also 25 centimeter display field of view. On the 25 display field of view, we can see the more number of bar pattern resolved compared to the 50 centimeter field of view, which basically implies that smaller the pixel size, greater the spatial resolution. This discussion is for the axial spatial resolution. Now, the other factors which affect spatial resolutions are the detector aperture size. This is the detector in the longitudinal direction. Reconstructed slice thickness, which is very much important when we are doing a 3D reconstruction, focal spot size of the X-ray tube, the number of projections used, and also the reconstruction algorithms. When you talk about detector aperture size, this is basically the width of the active detector element in the CT detector array, which is what is defined on the technologically driven in the multi-detector CT. In fact, the spatial resolution improves significantly in the longitudinal direction as the detector aperture size decreases. And in fact, that's one of the motivation for the CT technology in the past decade for driving towards more thinner and thinner detector sizes. On the other hand, the in-play X-ray resolution is not affected by the detector aperture size. That's because in the in-play it's influenced by the pixel size, the display field of view, and so forth. Here's an example of the multi-detector CT, the configuration of the detector combination and possible section width or slice width. Shown here is a multi-detector configuration, which is shown here is a Siemens Sensation 16 multi-detector CT scanner, which implies that it could apply 16 slices at a single canter rotation. So on this particular detector array, the user can acquire the data either 4 by 1.5 millimeter slices or 16 of 0.75 millimeter slices. What it basically means is like if you are acquiring at the thinner slices 0.75 millimeter detector aperture size, one can reconstruct images of various slice thickness such as 0.75, 1, 1.5 all the way to 10 millimeter by combining the data of various detector elements. Secondly, if the data is acquired by 4 by 1.5 millimeter, slice thickness can be reconstructed to 1.5, 2, 3, 4.5, 4 all the way to 10 millimeter. One rule of thumb is like the reconstructed slice thickness cannot be smaller than the acquired slice thickness. In fact, that's one of the reasons why the technology has driven towards more thinner and thinner detector size, because thinner the acquisition you can have, you have more possibility to reconstruct into thicker slices. That is demonstrated in this particular slice, showing the thinner images have a higher spatial resolution, at the same time has less partial volume effect on the Z direction. However, it is also accompanied by more noise. On this particular pattern shown here, the spatial resolution pattern of different slice thickness from a phantom. So the images acquired at 10 millimeter has an image noise of 2.9, all the way to 1.25 the image noise is higher. Basically telling us thinner images implies higher spatial resolution, less partial volume effect, but however it can have a higher noise. So there are some trade-off with respect to spatial resolution and slice thickness. The trade-off is as follows. At the same tube voltage and tube current, the number of detected photons arriving at the detector varies linearly with X slice thickness, which means thinner slices provide higher spatial resolution, but image noise increases. The image noise can be decreased by reconstructing into thicker slices, because thicker slices provide higher contrast resolution but poorer spatial resolution. Again shown here is another images of spatial resolution phantom acquired and reconstructed at different slice thickness. As one can see, moving from a thicker slice of 2.5 all the way to 0.625 mm, the spatial resolution pattern resolved on the rightmost image is much higher than the one image resolved at the 2.5 mm. Therefore, the spatial resolution in CT is determined both in the axial plane and in the longitudinal plane. In the longitudinal axis or the z-axis, it is determined by the detector thickness. In the multi-detector CT, the detector thickness is the detector aperture size, and thinner the detector, higher the spatial resolution, and that has been the driving force in the multi-detector CT. The second image quality factor is the contrast resolution. Contrast resolution is defined as follows. It is the ability to distinguish between differences in intensity in an image. So the contrast resolution is the ability to distinguish between differences in intensity in an image. So how difference is an object from its surrounding defines the contrast resolution. And also it is important to understand when low contrast resolution is critical. Shown is a series of image of the object with respect to the background, and the object becomes more clear and visible when the difference between the object and the background becomes larger. Also important is the contrast resolution is influenced by the size of the object and the image noise in the background. There are a number of factors which influences the contrast resolution in CT. Among them, the tube current and the MAS, the tube voltage, the pixel size, the slice thickness, and the reconstruction algorithm. Again, contrast resolution can be quickly assessed on a CT scanner using a phantom. Again, showing here is an ACR CT accreditation phantom, which has a module embedded with low contrast object. Shown here is on the right hand side is an image of the contrast resolution module showing objects of different sizes of different density. As the object sizes are smaller, it merges with the background, as can be shown here. There are a variety of factors interplay and influences the contrast resolution. One example is the contrast resolution impact with respect to the tube current. So by decreasing the tube current or the decreasing MAS, it increases the image noise and therefore decreases the contrast resolution. Shown on the right hand side is the two images obtained at two different MAS, 800 MAS on the top panel and 100 MAS at the bottom panel. On the image acquired at 100 MAS, one can see the image noise is kind of merging the low contrast objects, therefore making it difficult to visualize the low contrast object. On the other hand, at the 800 MAS, the objects shown is more clear because the image noise is much lesser. One way to gain the image contrast, even though acquired in a noisy image, is by increasing the slice thickness. In fact, by increasing the slice thickness, it improves the contrast resolution, however, at an expense of spatial resolution. And that is demonstrated in this particular slide. Decreasing the slice thickness leads to a decreased signal to noise ratio, so therefore decreases contrast resolution when all other factors are held constant. As shown here, two panels, one acquired reconstructed 5 mm slice, this bottom one reconstructed 0.625 mm slice. The 0.625 mm slice, because there are less number of X-ray photon is used for creating the image noise is greater, therefore it diminishes the contrast resolution. However, when it is reconstructed, multiple of these slices are reconstructed to 5 mm slice thickness, there are more number of X-ray photons are contributing to the image. Therefore, the contrast resolution improves. That can be understood as follows. As the patient size increases, contrast resolution decreases because there is a lot of image noise. Increasing the tube voltage or MAS improves contrast resolution. However, that's at an expense of radiation dose. There are some interplays, trade-off between the spatial contrast resolution and the slice thickness. The other factor which influences both spatial resolution and contrast resolution is the reconstruction algorithms. The reconstruction algorithms are provided by manufacturers. A number of reconstruction algorithms are available based on how mathematically they are modeling this particular raw data to reconstruct the image. The reconstruction algorithms affects both the spatial and contrast resolution and requires trade-off depending on the clinical need. So, a sharp reconstruction algorithm indicates an image with a higher spatial resolution but yields a greater image noise. A soft or smooth reconstruction algorithm reduces image noises but degrades spatial resolution. Shown here in the picture is the quantification of image noise, percent image noise versus various reconstruction algorithms. Each manufacturer has different nomenclature, but generally they can be grouped under smooth, medium and sharp. So shown here is like for using a sharp reconstruction algorithm, the image noise is very high, so is the spatial resolution. On the other hand, using a smooth reconstruction algorithm, the image noise is reduced but also compromises the spatial resolution. That can be demonstrated here in this effect of reconstruction algorithm on the abdominal phantom images. 3 simulated images reconstructed with different reconstruction algorithm. Very smooth, smooth and ultra sharp. Sharp image, you can see the images is very noisier, therefore it can diminishes the contrast resolution, but it can enhance the spatial resolution. The other secondary factor which influences spatial resolution or the contrast resolution is the effect of reconstruction interval. The effect of reconstruction interval does not impact the axial spatial resolution. However, when we are doing a longitudinal reconstruction such as sagittal or coronal reconstruction required for 3D reconstruction, the reconstruction intervals plays a significant role. On the left hand side is a sagittal reconstruction of a spine, of a lumbar spine. When the slice thickness is 2 mm and the reconstruction interval is 5 mm, the images have a lower image spatial resolution. On the other hand, when the same raw data is reconstructed at a slice thickness of 2 mm with a reconstruction interval of 1 mm, it improves the spatial resolution in the sagittal direction. Again, the effect of reconstruction interval was significant in the past when the computing power was less and it would take a longer time to reconstruct with a very small reconstruction interval. However, with the faster computing systems nowadays, this becomes irrelevant because one can reconstruct with whatever reconstruction interval in a very rapid pace. So in general, with regard to slice thickness, here is the main trade-off. When the slice thickness is large, the image noise is less. However, it is poor spatial resolution in the z-axis. It can provide a higher contrast resolution. When the slice thickness is very thin or small, it has higher spatial resolution in the z direction, greater noise, but lower contrast resolution. To wrap this podcast, the take-home message is follows. Demand for high spatial resolution has been the driving force behind multi-detector CT technologies strive for thinner detector in the z direction. Therefore, the rule of thumb is acquiring raw data at the smallest detector size provides an opportunity to reconstruct thinner slices needed for high spatial resolution, but at the same time, one can reconstruct thicker slices to improve the contrast resolution. So, one can always reconstruct thicker slices for thinner slices, but not the other way around. Therefore, understanding trade-off with regard to slice thickness is key to obtain high spatial and contrast resolution. Thank you.